Everybody, I am going to talk today about your subconscious mind. So in the next 10 minutes or so, you're probably going to understand more about your own behavior, why you do some of the things you do that you haven't understood before now, in a more clear way than you probably have your whole entire life. That's the feedback I get from my clients anyway. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I am absolutely in love with understanding human behavior, our subconscious mind, and you're about to understand as well. So I think a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I've drawn some very rough, but not being an artist myself, diagrams of what I'm talking about so that it will speak to both sides of your mind at the same time and just help you put everything together a little bit easier. So start off with, essentially, the reason why we don't understand the things we do is we have two minds. We have an unconscious mind and we have a conscious mind. Now, as you can imagine, there's a reason why I wrote the unconscious mind so big and the conscious mind so small. The unconscious mind is processing somewhere between millions to billions of bits of information per second. The numbers are all over the map, so if you look it up to refute what I'm saying, you will find something that says the opposite of what I'm saying, because the truth is nobody really understands. The mind is so big and so fast and so comprehensive, we can't track it. So the numbers are all over the map, but the basic message is unconscious mind is processing a lot of information. Conscious mind is getting only a tiny little bit of that information. For example, your unconscious mind is processing your digestive enzymes. It's regulating your heartbeat and your oxygen delivery. It also, however, remembers everything you've ever seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched since you were in utero. Amazing. It's all recorded. You might not have conscious access to it, but it's all there. So, how does your unconscious mind, which is so smart, has access to all information, decide what bit that we're consciously aware of? Well, most of it simply gets deleted. Now, it does this because just to make our life simpler, if we had to be consciously aware of everything going on inside of our bodies, much less everything going on in our environment around us, we'd go kind of crazy. So our unconscious mind simply deletes most of that information from our conscious awareness. For example, if you're driving down the road, your unconscious mind sees every car, sees every license plate, every street sign, every leaf blowing in the wind. You might be tuning all of it out thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, right? But now if somebody steps off the curb into the lane and into your lane, that gets flagged. Notice this. So your unconscious mind deletes what it feels is unnecessary for you to be aware of and to notice what is necessary for you to be aware of. Now that's going to differentiate for each one of us depending on what we think is important to notice. You may have been driving down the highway for months and not noticing a certain make or model of a car, but if you buy a specific make and model of car, suddenly you start to see them everywhere. Everybody's got the same car as you, whereas you didn't even notice those before, because that part of the brain called the reticular activating system says, you should notice this now, and then all of a sudden you start noticing that more than you may have before. Another main process that your brain uses to distill the information is distortion. We all have a need to make sense of our world. We need to understand what things mean and how we fit into the world. And so our mind simply distorts things. If we don't have any reference for it at all, our mind will go, well, it's kind of like this. So I think that must be what they're saying, or I think that must be what that is. The cutest example I heard of this was a story on Facebook. A grandmother said that her grandson made her his first cup of coffee. And she gets to the bottom of the cup and there's one of those little green soldiers. And she's like, honey, why is there a green soldier in my coffee? He goes, well, the best part of waking up is soldiers in your cup. So this is a cute example of how when we don't have a reference for something, we will think we heard something different, or we'll think that something means something in alignment with what we do have a reference for. Another main way that our unconscious mind deals with information is generalization. What does this mean? It means that your mind will take something that you learned in one situation and it will apply it to other similar situations, so you don't have to go through the learning curve each and every time. If you figure out how to get into your houses with a door and a doorknob, then you don't have to figure out how to break into a bank or a school or a church. They all work the same way. They all have doors. They all have some variation on a doorknob. So this just speeds up our learning curve so that we don't have to relearn everything specific for each situation. Now these are wonderful, amazing processes that our mind utilizes to make our lives simpler, more streamlined, more efficient. And we only notice them though when we get some erroneous or non-useful information. For example, if a boy grows up in a household where no affection is ever shown, he's never told I love you, he's not encouraged to express his emotions, maybe there's not even any affection, and then he grows up and gets married and he's in a relationship and he winds up in marriage counseling 2 years later, and his wife is discussing these issues, and he goes, well, she never shows me she loves me. And the wife's like, what are you talking about? I show you all the time. I even tell you I love you all the time. We would think that the guy is just lying or being a jerk. But the truth is, his mind literally deletes that information. It doesn't have a reference for that because he didn't grow up with those kinds of signs of affection. And it just like bounces off his mind, and he doesn't even notice when she's doing those things. Okay? Distortion can occur in an example of a girl growing up in a household where she's told she's stupid or ugly. Or maybe she's not even told she's stupid and ugly. She's just made to feel as though she's stupid and ugly. When this happens and she grows up and she gets married and her husband's like, oh, you're so beautiful, she rolls her eyes and goes, I hate it when he says that. He's just being sarcastic. He's being truthful. But she doesn't have a reference for the possibility that she is beautiful, so she distorts that information to think it's sarcasm. An example of generalization in a way that doesn't work out the way we like is phobias. Someone may, develop a phobia of spiders in one incident, and that input goes straight into their subconscious mind because of the high emotion and becomes a phobia right away. But then the mind can generalize that information so that they may become afraid of all insects, or they may become afraid of going outside because that's where insects are. So these processes are just the way our mind handles information. It's not good, it's not bad, it's simply the way our mind deals with information. The only time we notice it, however, if it's causing us pain or suffering or some discomfort in our life or something's not working, then we say, well, what's wrong with me? There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. There's just something wrong with the information that went into your mind. Your mind's doing the same thing with that information as it does with all the useful information. It just treats it the same. It's information, and it uses the same processes, but we only notice it, like I said, when it's causing a problem in our life. So, moving on from there. We all interface with our world through our 5 senses. So, we hear things, we see things, somebody looks at us in that way, or they use that tone of voice, or whatever the case may be. That input comes into our eyes or our ears, and our unconscious mind, which processes millions of bits of information per second, it quickly checks every visual memory file, every auditory memory file, everything we've ever told ourselves, and all of our feelings. And it does it so quick, it just goes through all those memory files and spits out a response and says, this is how you feel, this is what it means, and this is what you should do in response to it. Now, we don't even know where that came from, but our unconscious mind, because it's happening so quickly outside of our conscious awareness, we think that our feelings are just true and that they reflect something true about our world or what's really happening. And NLP uses a great expression. They say a better question than why is how. There's no real reason often why we feel a certain way. It's really the better question is, how does our brain come up with that response? What is our subconscious mind looking at and seeing or hearing that's giving us that response of this is how I feel and this is what I should do in response? To give you an example, a beautiful woman walks into a room, okay? A man might be like, hubba hubba. A little girl might be like, I want to be just like her when I grow up. Another woman might be like, witch, okay? Now, it's just a woman walking into a room, but depending on what's inside their individual memory files, they're going to have a very individual response. And we call that our internal representation or internal reality. We all have a very individual internal reality. It's really amazing that we're able to communicate at all. Mother may mean warm milk and cookies to you. It may mean raving lunatic alcoholic to someone else. Now on the surface they may be talking about mothers and communicating on a surface level, but what's going on individually in their own subconscious mind, emotions, and processes are as different as night and day. So if we have an eyewitness, if there's a crime and there's 10 eyewitnesses, how many different eyewitness accounts do you think the police are going to get? Well, probably about 10, because everybody's seeing it through their own personal and individual filters. Now, it could only happen one way. It was one crime. But people literally think that they remembered it a different way than someone else, which kind of shows you that our memories are not that reliable. So moving on, once again, we can see from this that our internal reality creates ultimately our potential in life. So for this example, I'm going to talk about two men who work for an advertising firm. Okay? Objectively, you would think that they have an equal playing field. They're both good looking, got great ideas, well educated, intelligent. But they have two very different internal realities. This gentleman was in the limelight in high school. He was the class clown. He can't wait to go to those Monday morning meetings. He gives his ideas. Everybody high-fives him, tells him how smart and cool he is. And he's like, you know what? I am pretty cool. I think I'll go for that promotion. Now this guy, when he was in the second grade, he got up to spell the spelling word and he spelled it wrong. All the kids laughed. The teacher even got mad because she'd been going over that word all day long. So his unconscious mind, in order to protect him, decided this is a scary situation. Now his unconscious mind will generalize that information just like we generalize all information. So when he's in a similar situation, i.e. those Monday morning meetings, his unconscious mind registers, this is dangerous, bad things happen when you speak up in groups, I'm going to protect you by making your palms sweat, your throat go dry, your mind go blank, and he just sits there getting mad at himself going, I can't believe I'm doing this again, because he doesn't have any conscious awareness of why this is happening to him. He might not even remember that happened in the second grade consciously, but his unconscious mind remembers everything. And it's looking at how to respond and how to feel in this situation at that memory of when he spelled the spelling word wrong in the second grade. So then he now distorts the feedback he gets. He says to himself, well, nobody cares about what I have to say. Well, you didn't say anything, they can't. And so then he makes that mean either I suck, I might as well just keep my head down and keep quiet, keep chugging along, or he might say this place sucks, I might as well quit. So you can see how it's two very different potentials because of their internal realities. One's going to go for the promotion, the other one might quit or just never even consider going for that promotion. So we have a serious communication breakdown. So, Joseph Ron wrote a book about the right brain. And as you can see, they're quite different. And most of us are familiar with that idea that the right brain is more artistic and creative. But the right brain is also, it thinks in pictures, movies, emotions. Okay? Just so you know, I know that I'm cross over some, comparisons with the right brain and the unconscious, the left brain and the conscious. I know these comparisons aren't that accurate. I put this together because nobody truly understands the mind, and these are ways for us to kind of have a handle on something that's really not that understandable, okay? So don't take everything I say as, gospel truth or the absolute truth or the way it is. I'm just presenting a picture of the mind so that you can understand it a little bit easier, okay? So we have our left brain, which thinks in logic, verbal language, science and math, and it's analytical. And so Joseph Ron went on to say that the two halves of the brain cannot perceive the same information in the same way that an eye can't hear and an ear can't see. I'm reading this, by the way. If one half can't perceive it, then as far as it's concerned, certain types of information simply don't exist. Since a lot of what happens in the right brain can't be analyzed, the left brain deems it as insignificant. So a lot of the information in the subconscious mind is simply not shared, it's deleted, remember? Now, a lot of what it does decide to share, shares it in a language that our left brain simply doesn't understand. So it thinks, well, that just doesn't make any sense, I'll ignore it. Another book that I would highly recommend is called The Gift of Fear. And it was written by a private investigator who investigated and interviewed victims of violent crimes after the fact. And over time, he started to see some patterns. And he said the most interesting thing he realized was that they always had a hunch, but they didn't do anything about it. So he was very curious about this. But here's the thing. Our unconscious mind is taking in all of this information, right? Every little tiny detail. Your unconscious mind might notice that his eye expression doesn't match his smile, or his body language might not match his tone of voice. But we can't decipher all of those nuances so quickly, so our unconscious mind speaks to us with that pit in our stomach or the hair coming up in the back of our neck. But then our left brain, which doesn't know where this information is coming from, and it doesn't seem logical, we may tell ourselves something like, Serena, you're just being paranoid. He's just trying to be a nice guy. Why would you think that about him? So we poo-poo that information that's coming through to us because we've lost rapport with that part of ourselves. We've been taught so long to repress our emotions and our feelings and not to give any credence to things that are illogical, that we don't even know how to hear the messages coming from our unconscious mind, much less do we know how to communicate with that part of our mind in response to it. Another example would be if somebody starts off getting headaches and that keeps compounding to where the migraines get more and more severe, or they could develop some type of high blood pressure or even a brain tumor, or stress that we ignore long enough till it does become high blood pressure and then heart disease. Our unconscious mind, when it gives us discomfort or pain, it's not trying to give us discomfort or pain for no reason. It's trying to communicate a message that we have lost the ability to understand what it's saying. And then if we ignore it and we don't investigate what it is trying to communicate, then it keeps knocking louder. It might knock a little bit, we ignore it, knocks louder, ignore it, it gets really loud to where we can't ignore it, and it may become a physical illness at some point. So we have a couple of breakdowns in communication. 1, information gets deleted. 2, when our unconscious or right brain does try to communicate with us, we don't understand what it's saying because it's using things like, symbols or emotion or things that we don't understand what it's trying to say. We may see a picture of something or our intuition, and we don't know how to interpret whether that's real or not, true or not. And then we have one other breakdown in communication. Don't worry, I'm going to unravel how we overcome all of these in just a minute, so don't think it's too complicated or daunting of a task that we can't get there, okay? So this one's, sorry, it's not in black and white. I just took this from somebody else's. But you can see here that we have the conscious mind. We have the subconscious mind. The superconscious mind would be your higher self, some would say, and we're not going to talk too much about that in this presentation, but we may get into that in the future. But the one I want you to notice right here is this critical factor. The critical factor is sort of like the analyzer or the judge. It decides what gets to get down into your subconscious mind. For example, if I told you, you know what, if you grab an umbrella and you jump off my roof, you can fly like Mary Poppins. And you'd be like, you are crazy, lady. Right, with good reason. Because your analyzer, your critical factor would say, that's not true, don't let that information in. Now, if I told a 4-year-old that, they might try it, right? Because kids before the age of 6 or 8, they don't have a critical factor. They don't have an ability to judge or decide whether something's true or not. They just let it all in. That's why kids believe that Santa can go to every single house on the same night and deliver toys. It's not logical, but they don't question it because they don't have that part of their brain yet. Now, this is very important because before those ages, everything goes into a child's mind completely unquestioned, completely unfiltered. So anything that they're told, they believe it. Anything that they infer or they see acted around them becomes their truth. If they see daddy beating up on mommy, well then men are unsafe, or maybe women should just take it. It implies something about them and their relationship to the world. If they're told they're stupid or ugly, or if they're treated as if they're not as smart, then they decide that they're stupid. They don't have a question to say, well, that's not good for me to believe that. They just believe it. Okay? So all of these things go into our minds completely unfiltered and become our own personal gospel truth, if you want. Okay? So just to give you an example of how, this is real, we all see that if somebody is raised in a certain religion, that is true for them. If you're raised Islamic, that is true. If you're raised Christian, that is true. If you're raised in some other religion, that is true. And you don't really, at those young ages, have an ability to question it. Now, after age 8 or so, the critical factor comes along and it's developed, and it comes and puts sort of like a seal on top of your subconscious mind. Now this advocate for you is only going to let things in that are true. But how does it decide what's true? Well, primarily it decides it based on what's already down there. Okay? So once you become influenced into a belief, a positive belief may be your religion, and then if you think about another, stream of thought, you might feel kind of guilty or like it's wrong, and it simply seems very wrong to you because you have formed your beliefs of the world. Now, negative beliefs can also take the same form. If you grow up really with this negative, this self-doubt, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and then you get to an adult stage and you hear about the power of positive thinking and affirmations, you're like, you know what, I don't want to feel terrible about myself anymore. I'm going to start giving myself positive affirmations that I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Sorry, little reference to Saturday Night Live. Anyway, so we want to give ourselves positive affirmations, as we should, because the truth is we're okay. But here's the problem. The critical factor is only going to let what's true down into your subconscious mind. And you come along and you say, I am smart. And the critical factor goes, that's not a match for what's down here, therefore it's not true, and it kicks it out. And you try more affirmations and the critical factor is going, not buying it, not true, and it just doesn't let those really down into the subconscious mind. Now, trance or hypnosis can be helpful with this because during trance, it allows the critical factor to sort of take a nap or a hike or not be so vigilant. Okay, so then we can get some of those positive affirmations down into our subconscious mind, either through using self-hypnosis, the binaural beats that people listen to, and there's other techniques or meditation where people are able to get the critical factor out of the way so that we can get some positive thoughts down into there. So how do we overcome all of these breakdowns in communication, the deletion, the different language that they speak, not understanding each other, the critical factor, which is keeping positive ideas out? Well, there's a few ways that we can do it. One of them being hypnosis. Now, I just want to simplify hypnosis. There's nothing weird, woo-woo, or out there with hypnosis. It's simply an altered brainwave state. And by altered, I mean different than your awake, talking, focused brainwave state. But it's nothing altered about it really, as far as you go into these brainwaves every single day on your way into sleep and every single day on your way out of sleep. Okay? Perfectly naturally occurring. It's just altered from your focused, listening to me, doing your job, paying your taxes brainwave state. Okay? So when we're in deep sleep, we are in delta. Okay? Babies are in delta most of the time. They sleep, they wake up to eat and poop, go back to sleep, okay? The next slowest brain waves is theta. That's when you're dreaming. It's 4 to 7 cycles per second. When you're dreaming or when you're kind of almost falling asleep and you might even be aware of some of those, those dreamy thoughts, that's when you're in theta, very, very slow. It's also where preschoolers live most of the time, that they love their world of imagination, right? It's almost as if they're living in a semi-dream world, and it blends with reality because they're in theta. That's really the only reason. That's also, I believe, where most stage hypnosis subjects are. Some of them don't remember afterwards like a real deep dream. Other ones do remember. It's more like they've returned to that 4-year-old state where they kind of know what they're doing, but they're having so much fun they just really don't care. Now the next one is alpha, 7 to 14 cycles per second. That's when someone is either daydreaming or they're driving down the highway, zoning out, thinking about what they're going to have for dinner, or maybe something that happened last week. I think we've all been there. We've all gotten somewhere where we're going to, our destination point and think, man, I don't even remember driving here. It's because you're in alpha. Your mind was kind of zoned out. Your subconscious mind is capable of driving at this point, probably more efficiently than when you're paying attention half the time, because you've been doing it so long. And then beta is 15 to 21 cycles per second, and that's when, like I said, you're doing your job, listening to me, paying your taxes, you're focused on what you're doing. So, hypnosis basically is nothing more than going into these naturally occurring brainwave states on purpose, for a purpose that you set out to give some positive suggestions or do some deeper work. And by doing that, we take advantage of our brain's natural ability to go into these lower brainwave states where we have access to the subconscious mind, where we can receive its messages and give messages back. Okay? Nothing weird about it. Perfectly natural. Now, that's one way that we can affect change, and that's often by putting positives down in here in the subconscious mind. We want to put positives down. Now, another way doesn't even require hypnosis. Remember, we talked about how the right brain or the subconscious mind speaks in pictures, movies, emotions, imagination, all that weird woo-woo stuff. Okay. And our left brain speaks in verbal language, logic, it's analytical, oh so smart, right? So, but remember which brain is processing more information? The unconscious, right? It's processing millions of bits of information per second, conscious mind 40, and yet we think it's smarter because it's logical. So when we speak the language of the unconscious mind, it can be very effective and have much more change, even than with regular just hypnosis with positive verbal suggestions. So just for the metaphor, I'm just going to say that the left brain speaks English and the right brain speaks Chinese. Okay? So we kind of finally figure out maybe at some point that we're really, really smart, but we can't seem to figure out this problem. And so we think, well, maybe it lies in the other part of my mind. So then we go to the gatekeeper and we say, hey man, I need the keys to the problem. But guess what? He doesn't speak English. So that you just roll your eyes and think, I guess I'll speak slower and louder the way we often talk to ourselves. But he still doesn't speak English. So then you get kind of annoyed. You start smacking him around, calling him names, grabbing him by the scruff of the collar, the way we often beat up on ourselves. But he still doesn't speak English. So then finally you go, oh, I've got to speak to him in Chinese. And he's like, oh yeah, the keys are right here. So when we speak to our unconscious mind in the language that it understands, symbolism, imagination, going into pictures and movies from the past, all those things that we think are so weird, the unconscious mind, which is way smarter, goes, finally some useful information. I know what to do with this. And then change can be really quick and really easy. So trying to fix an illogical problem with logic is like trying to speak English to a Chinese person. You can do it for 100 years and you really don't get anywhere. I think most of us have some example in our life how that's been true. So how do we make all of these changes then and communicate with our subconscious mind so that we can actually change those things that we want to change? So this is, just to start off with, this is a memory that's caught up in the system of our amygdala, and it's telling us what we're looking at so that we know how to feel and how we relate to ourselves and people in the world. So in this memory, this is you, and this is the bad guy. And the bad guy could be a bully who treated you badly on the schoolyard, it can be a parent, it could be cigarettes, it could be a molester, it could be anything or anyone who has caused you some type of emotional trauma and is still just playing there in the background. So these memories, like I said, are a reference for how to feel about ourselves and relate to the world. And when that happened, it really, really happened. But it's not happening right now, obviously. You're sitting here watching me doing this video. But there is one place that it's happening. It's still happening inside your mind. And that movie is just kind of on auto drive. It's just playing over and over again. And every time that you roll the tape, so to speak, now this doesn't mean that you're consciously rolling the tape, but every time that that movie is playing over and over, it's sort of like you're re-traumatizing yourself. Not on purpose. You don't even know that you're doing it. That guy who spelled the spelling word wrong in the 2nd grade and now is afraid to speak up in groups doesn't even remember that happened. But that movie is just playing constantly, telling him, this is dangerous, I'm going to protect you, and make your palms sweat and your mind go blank. So the great thing about knowing that we're doing it to ourselves, so to speak, not consciously, not on purpose, but nevertheless we are, is that we can take creative license and we can make a new movie. So we simply go into the past and change the pictures, change the emotions, change all of the outcomes so that we make a fake movie. Now, it doesn't matter that we're making a fake movie, because guess what? Your brain can't really tell the difference between a real memory and a non-real memory. And in fact, there are no real memories. Remember the crime with the 10 eyewitnesses? There were 10 different eyewitness accounts. They all remembered it differently. And as we know, it only happened one way. So our memories aren't that real anyway. And if we want to make a fake memory that lets us feel good instead of feeling terrible, I think that's a good thing to do. Now, here's the options that we have right now. If you keep making choices that lead to pain and failure, if you keep stuck in the same patterns that lead to pain and failure, it's because in your mind you don't have a choice. So if you think about Darwinian evolutionary theory, and I'm not saying I'm a Darwin theorist, but I think it's safe to say that any animal, person, or organism will do what's in its interest to survive and to thrive. So even a one-eyed worm, if it has a choice between toxic water and clean water, will drink the clean water. Now the only time it would drink toxic water is if that's the only water that there is. So the only reason that we keep making the same painful choices over and over again is because we think somewhere in our subconscious mind that that's the only choice that there is. Just like the gentleman who's afraid in the room Monday morning meetings. Now, does he have a choice to speak up and give his ideas? Of course he does. But in his mind, he doesn't have a perceived choice. In his mind, the fear is so overwhelming that it feels as if he doesn't have a choice. So he keeps his mouth shut, and this keeps happening to him over and over again like Groundhog Day. So now when we go in and we create a new memory, our subconscious mind can't really tell, or at least it doesn't care about the difference between the two. If you hook someone's brain up to a PET scan, that's where the different parts of the brain light up. If you do the scan while they're eating an apple, and then you do a scan while they're vividly imagining eating an apple, the same parts of the brain will light up. What does this mean? We can go in and create a fake memory, a good, happy memory, and now we've given our brain another choice. It comes to this crossroad. It has the same stimulus. The beautiful woman walks into the room. Somebody speaks to us in that tone of voice. We see or hear something. We're in a certain situation. Our brain comes to this fork in the road. It goes, okay, I can look at the picture that makes me feel terrible, or I can look at the picture that makes me feel good. And this is still all happening subconsciously, but given a choice, it will do the one that leads to feeling better, because even a one-eyed worm will drink clean water when given a choice. And I believe that you would too. So now we have a choice to be happy, and we don't even have to do it. We don't have to muscle through it. We don't have to consciously make ourselves try to be happy. Our subconscious mind is just simply looking at happier pictures now and automatically, easily feeling better and making healthier, easier choices. And wouldn't that feel better than having to consciously fight our way through being happy and fight our way through making better choices, to just let our unconscious mind do it for us? So this is a problem tree, I like to say, and this is the root cause, and all trees, as we know, come from a seed. And when we have a traumatic event or something that's unresolved in our subconscious, it started somewhere, okay? And over time, our subconscious mind will generalize that information, the same way that we'll generalize the information of doors and doorknobs. So we figure out how to feel like a failure in our work life. We figure out how to feel like a failure in our relationships, or our finances, or sports, or whatever the case may be. We become masterful at feeling bad in all kinds of areas of our life, so to speak, because our mind is doing the same thing with that information as it would do with good or happy information. So now we can have a few approaches. We can come along and work on our weight, and work on our relationship, and work on our work career and all of that, which is all great. But the most bang for the buck, so to speak, is if we come down to the root cause, we rip that root out, and then what happens to the problem tree? Well, you rip out the roots, the tree dies and falls over. Then we can plant a happy seed, and we can allow your unconscious mind to generalize all that information the same way and bring happiness and success and feeling good enough and feeling accepted and loved into all of those areas of your life. And you may find unexpected good changes in areas of your life that you weren't even necessarily trying to address. And it can be easy. So, last point, I really am about over, is this little model of ourselves. So, inside of here it says perfect. And what that means is that your true self is perfect. When babies are born, they don't know that they're anything but perfect. But then what happens? Life happens. And we get this whole layer of trauma, bad events, stuff that happens to us. And so we don't even want to look at it. Most people spend a whole lifetime trying to avoid looking at the pain and trauma of their childhood or their life, or the things that tell them they're not good enough. And so we certainly don't want to feel that pain ourselves, and we even more don't want other people to see us that way. So our coping mechanism is then to put this layer of red shiny nail polish on top of the stuff. And that's our way of interfacing with the world, way of gaining acceptance. And maybe our way is to be the funny one, or the smart one, or the kind one, the caretaker. Whatever it is, that's the persona that we put on to try to get along in the world, gain acceptance, and feel okay, like we know our place in the world. But here's the problem. Over time, that red shiny nail polish starts to chip and to crack. And we repair it and we put more nail polish on. But after 10 or 20 years of that, you just start to get exhausted. And that's usually when people show up to see me. They're like, all of their coping mechanisms are not working anymore. They've run their course with those, and they're finally ready to get some help in a way that they don't know how to help themselves. And none of us know that. We're not born knowing this. It's only because I've studied under many masterful people, watched many geniuses on YouTube, and I put all of this stuff together in a way that I think is useful for understanding our complex mind. So when people come to see me, rather than helping them repair the nail polish, we go into this layer of pain and we simply remove it. And when you do that, you can go back to the truth of who you are, which is perfect, because that's how I see each and every person. We all have our coping mechanisms. We all have our dysfunction. I know that that's just our mind doing what it does with the information we were given. We all create our own individual reality. It's our best way of coping with life stressors, the way we were presented with them. But the real truth underneath all of that is perfection. And when you can just, with ease and grace, flow from that place, life really can feel better. And that's my wish for each and every one of you. So I hope that you found this useful. Please feel free to leave any comments, questions. You can visit me on my website at belimitlesshypnosis.com, or on Facebook. My name is Serenadenmark, and I look forward to seeing you there, and have a great day. Bye.